Hello, my name is Sergio Hernandez. I will be doing the video portion of my Biology 230 Anatomy Physio class, and we will be doing the axial and the appendicular skeleton. So let's begin. This is going to be the list that I'm going to be using. So make sure that I cover everything. Okay. And this is my skeleton. So let's go ahead and begin, and we're going to go ahead and start with the anterior portion of the skull. So off top, we're going to go with the nasal bone. This is going to be your nasal bone. You got your sphenoid. Your sphenoid's right in here, like right there. You got your lacrimal. Lacrimal will be right here, proximal to the nasal bone. This is your lacrimal. Then you got your ethmoid, which is going to be right proximal behind that. Your zygomatic. This is your zygomatic. You have your maxilla. This is your maxilla. You got your mandible. It's your mandible. You got your frontal. Here's your frontal. And your vomer. Your vomer will be right here, right underneath the plate. That's going to be your vomer. Let's do posterior skull. Just turn this guy around. Now on the posterior skull, we have mandible. You can see your mandible. Occipital. This is your occipital. You got your parietal. Parietal, you can see a little bit of it right here. And then you got your temporal. The temporal is the one you get just a little whim of it right there. That should be your temporal. Let's do lateral skull. So I'm going to keep bringing him around right there so you can see that. So we're going to start with your ethmoid. Your ethmoid is going to be right in here, again proximal to the lacrimal. You got your frontal. This is your frontal. Your lacrimal, we said, is right there. We got your mandible and your maxilla. This is your mandible. This is going to be your maxilla. We got your nasal bone. So this is going to be your nasal bone. We have your occipital. Your occipital is right here. We're going to have your parietal. This is your parietal. Temporal bone. Temporal bone. And your zygomatic. So you can clearly see your zygomatic right there. Those will be your lateral skull. Let's do inferior skull. Inferior skull, let's open this little guy up right here. Let me put this down. You got ethmoid. Your ethmoid is going to be right here. You got your frontal. This is your frontal. You have your occipital. Right here's your occipital. You have your parietal. A little bit of it right here is your parietal. Your sphenoid, this guy right here is your sphenoid, and he kind of wraps around the ethmoid. This is your sphenoid. And your temporal, and you get a little whisk of the temporal right there. So that should cover that portion of it. And I believe we're doing this next. So we're going to do vertebrae. So let's start with the atlas. Your atlas is right here, most superior vertebrae right there. We got your axius. That's going to be the second one down. This is your axius and your cervical vertebrae. Your cervical vertebrae make up the first 7 vertebrae. This will be your cervical vertebrae. Now we're going to do your coccyx. Your coccyx is your little tailbone right here. You have your lumbar vertebrae. The lumbar vertebrae is made up of 5 vertebrae. I'm down in here. These will be your lumbar. You have your sacrum. This is your sacrum. And your thoracic vertebrae. Your thoracic vertebrae will be right in here, and they're made up of 12 vertebrae. That'll cover that. Let's go do thoracic cage. Let's bring it around one more time. So on thoracic cage, we have the body of the sternum. This is going to be the body of the sternum. This is the manubrium of the sternum. We have 3 types of ribs: false ribs, floating ribs, and true ribs. These are going to be your true ribs right here up until these 3 here. These 3 here connect to the vertebrae. They come around and they connect to the cartilage. They don't connect to the sternum as the true ribs do. And these are called the false ribs. Now, the floating ribs are going to be these 4 here that connect to the vertebrae, but they just float. They don't connect either to the sternum or to the cartilage. As you can clearly see, this is why they're called the floating ribs. Now let's go ahead and talk about the pelvic girdle. Pelvic girdle down here, we have the, pelvic girdle, yes, pelvic girdle. Let's do the clavicle, the humerus, radius, scapula, ulna. So the clavicle, these are your clavicle, your humerus, this is going to be your humerus. We have your radius and your ulna. Your radius will be thumb side here. This is your radius, and this is going to be your ulna, and we have a scapula. Your scapula, if we turn you around, it's going to be right there. Okay, that should cover that. Hands and wrists. So let's go ahead and put this down for a second. These are going to be the bones of the hand. We're going to start right here on the thumb. This is going to be the scaphoid, followed by the lunate, followed by, well, all the way in the end, you have the pisiform. In between the pisiform and the lunate, you can barely see it. It's kind of difficult to see, is the triquetrium. So you have scaphoid, you have lunate, triquetrium, and the pisiform. Then we come down here and we have the hamate, the capitate, you have the trapezoid and the trapezium. These are your metacarpals. These are your phalanges. You have proximal, medial, and distal, except the thumb that just has proximal and distal. So that covers the hand. Let's go to, now we do the pelvic. I apologize. This is going to be your pelvic girdle. And you have the ilium. This is going to be your ilium. Your ischium is going to be down in here. My skeleton's position's a little off, but that's your ischium. This is your pubis bones right here, the two of them. You're going to do the femur. This big bone here is your femur, the biggest bone of all. You have your patellas right there, and then you have your fibia, which would be lateral, and medial would be your tibia. So tibia, fibia, femur, patella. Okay? And then last but not least, let's go ahead and do the ankle since we're down here and the hands and feet down here. So let's start with this big guy here is going to be your calcaneus. This is going to be your talus. Then you have your navicular. You're going to have your cuboid. And then you have your lateral, your intermediate, and your medial cuneiform. These are your metatarsals. And these are, again, your phalanges. And once again, you have proximal, medial, and distal, except the big toe that's just going to have proximal and distal. That should go ahead, and I think I covered all the bones on this list. Thank you very much, and have a nice day.